It's a very great pleasure to introduce Tony Wilmott. I'm sure many of you know. Tony is a university alumnus, and after working for, among other bodies, the West Yorkshire Archaeological Service, he's been a senior archaeologist at English Heritage and then Historic England for many years, and has directed a series of nationally important research excavations, including Richborough, Whitby, Chesters, and Maryport, the latter with Professor Ian Haynes, who's also the co-director of the Birdoswald project. In 2012, he was named Current Archaeologist of the Year. And in the year of Hadrian's Wall, the Hadrian's Wall 1900-year anniversary celebrations, I'm very pleased to ask Tony to speak to you tonight about recent excavations in the extramural areas at Birdoswald.
Well, it's a very great pleasure to be invited to speak to you tonight, and it's nice to see so many friends in the audience, including up the back there, quite a number of people who did the hard work. You're all very welcome. This is going to be a bit of an experiment in that we have done 2 seasons of work now on the extramural area at Birdoswald. I'll come into the details of the project a little later on, but we only came off site the second time in mid-July. I've had a hectic Limes Congress since then, and those of you who've been to Limes Congress, Katie, know what that's like. And it's been a bit of a job trying to pull this together so I've got something coherent to say at this time of the project. But it's up to you to judge whether that's actually worked. So Birdoswald need no introduction. It is marked with the purple ring there in case there's anybody who doesn't know where it is, which in this audience I severely doubt. This one's just a reminder that the Birdoswald zone on Hadrian's Wall is one of the most complex on the line. It's the place where the turf wall, the initial turf wall and the stone wall bifurcate, with the fort originally being a projecting fort to the turf wall, and then subsequently the stone rebuild towards the end of Hadrian's reign, which goes as far as Milecastle 54 at the end of Hadrian's reign. But this turf and stone realignment meet just off this slide at Milecastle 51, and the purpose effectively of the realignment, the stone realignment in this area, is yet to be discovered, but the key is that the stone wall is realigned to meet the north corners of the fort at Birdoswald, rather leaving it behind the curtain wall rather than being a projecting fort, and that the relevance of that will become apparent as we go along. And for that reason, this aerial view, which you'll see in many varieties during the evening, during the course of the evening, I just put on the line of the turf wall to make that point. The road, of course, is the line of the stone wall. I'm sorry, I don't actually have a pointer, so I can't flourish, and I don't have a stick either. I always like to have a stick. But I'd have to explain what I was pointing out first, wouldn't I? Turf wall, that's fairly well labelled. The interior of the fort is pretty well known, the sequence pretty well known through a series of excavations. This, just to remind you, is the 1929 excavation. I said it's the culmination of a campaign of trenching. There was an awful lot of trenching during the 1930s after the famous 1929 excavation on the Barrack block, ringed on the plan and on the aerial photograph, which was the first, claims to be the first major excavation to actually examine stratification of structures within Hadrian's Wall fort, and of course was the source of the famous 4-period system, which was applied, well, still applied to Hadrian's Wall when I went to school anyway, here between 1974 and 1977. And subsequently, large-scale excavations in the 1980s and 1990s in the northwest quadrant of the fort, in the area again, ringed, has really resulted in the fact that we've got about 21% of the interior of the fort excavated, and we've got a fairly good handle on the phasing of the interior of the fort. So first 1987 to 92, I'm particularly fond of this slide, shows the excavation its greatest extent in the summer of 91. The south granary there completely consolidated, consolidation of the north granary in progress, also including the excavation of the west gate, the west defences, the ditches, the Via Principalis, buildings to the north of the Via Principalis, that's 87 to 92, and then subsequently 97. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cough. This has been, so I apologise if I'm coughing into the microphone from time to time. That was followed in 97 to 98, when the current visitor centre was created by excavations underneath the floors of all the buildings, underneath all the courtyards, which resulted in our understanding, pretty much complete understanding of the Fort Praetentura, or at least the western side of the Fort Praetentura from excavations, and the eastern side from geophysical survey. This is just an example of the phasing we understand, showing the Hadrianic phase of the Praetentura, the Severian phase. Other periods are available, running right the way up to the end of the Roman period and beyond, as many of you know. Now, the contrast between what we understand of the interior of the fort and what we understood about the extramural area of the fort is considerable. The excavators of the 1890s right through to the 1930s were principally concerned with establishing the relationship between turf wall, stone wall, vallum, forts, all the different major features of Hadrian's Wall. And this is Haverfield in 1898. As you can see, he's looking at the turf wall ditch, he's looking at the line of the stone wall, the line of the vallum there curving round to the bottom of the fort. And he shows, he has excavated, he has located a stone building in the area known as Chapel Field, which may or may not be, the name may or may not be significant. He thought it's probably a medieval building, but we can't perhaps completely exclude the idea that it might be a Roman structure. Anyway, it is the only stone structure known by 1898 within the extramural area. In 1930, Sir Ian Richmond did a good amount of trenching and also excavation. Again, he's doing trenching to examine the course of the Vallum ditch here, the relationship with the fort, but he also cut a trench straight across, almost diagonally. If I had a pointer I could show, but almost diagonally from the S of Via Principalis right the way across through those two walls south of the Via Quintana and onwards, a trench right the way across the fort to look at the relationship of buildings, where the buildings were, and so forth. The most important thing that he established there was the existence of what he called the Birdoswald morass. In doing that, he really established what the topography of the fort is, the fact that it's terraced from a low-lying point in two directions. So the contour plan shows the bog, the morass at the bottom within the 156 metre contour, then the slope rising quite sharply up to 160 metres at the south side of the fort, rising sharply again to 158 metres, which is, as you can see on the slide, can I point with this? Yes, I can I? There it is. So that's the slope down to the 160 contour. This is the slope up to the 158 contour and the line of the turf wall, which runs along that ridge. And then it goes back down again. The slope goes back down again to the north in the Praetentura, and then down to the low-lying area in the Midgehome Moss at the other side. So he's established this terracing. He's also looking, trenching, searching for the vallum here, and he found other things. This square stone building, a good building, standing 13 courses high, what do you say, 20 feet square and with 3'6" wide walls, this building here, which variously became interpreted subsequently. He never suggested it. I think I've suggested at one point, might be a signal tower or something of that nature. It's certainly been suggested at different times, and some stone line drains down here. And it's worth noting the buried rear wall of the Principia down here, which is buried, with the top of which is at ground level today, is buried standing 15 courses high, and Richmond reported this building standing 13 courses high. And this, of course, is a function of the survival of these buildings as the topography changes, as that dip into the morass silts up, collapsed buildings sort of gradually go down into it and so forth. The collapse goes down, and gradually that terracing that we found evidence of levels up, certainly within the fort. I'll show you what happens outside the fort shortly, but that morass, I mean, when the turf wall is built, basically Birdoswald is a piece of damp woodland around a basin mire, and the site has to be prepared for the fort by cutting down the woodland and draining the morass. So one can expect in those deeper areas substantial drainage features and all that kind of thing in order to maintain the topography. Trenching to the south of the fort, Simpson Richmond, first of all, at the top, this is their plan of the 1932 work, including the first vallum crossing like that at Benwell to be identified. I've arrowed that. And then we went back to this area in 1996, trenching to mitigate the apparent threat of cliff erosion. It looked like it was going to go, but it hasn't gone yet at that point. And reappraising the 1932 work. And what that produced was, in the green there, a pair of pre-fort enclosures, promontory enclosures, and the bottom silt of which was found Roman tent leather. Then the vallum, shown in sort of yellowy colour, the vallum ditch, including the first vallum crossing, and then a triple ditch. You can see two clear ditches there, one there, one there, and in our trench here we found a third ditch which would have curved around here, whoops, and shows that. Can I go back? I wonder. No. Of course I can. Thank you, Martha. I should understand that, shouldn't I? So the triple ditches cut the vallum filling, we found that. And then the fourth phase, a rectangular enclosure and timber slot buildings, which cut the back filling of the middle ditch at this point here. We demonstrated that relationship at this point here. Now, those timber buildings had been identified, had been partially excavated by Richmond and Simpson in 1932, but the stratigraphic relationships had not been correctly understood. And what we have here is two unique features. The Fort South Gate's totally blocked, excavation of 1850 by the Potter brothers showed that. And we have this 3rd century settlement comprising this rectangular enclosure and these timber buildings, and here the use alone of this specific type of Frisian style pottery, later known as Housted's ware, none of which was actually found in that 21% of the interior of the fort as we're excavating that. This Housted's ware entirely concentrated in this area, this 3rd century settlement area to the south of the fort. So we did know this of the Extramural settlement, Richmond's little building, and a fair idea through Richmond's work and then from our own work in 1996 what was going on the south side. That was 1996, and then of course the story changed with Alan Biggins and David Taylor's geophysical survey, timescape geophysical surveys in 1998 and 1999. And Birdoswald was the first of these massive geophysical surveys that Alan and David did on the extramural areas of the forts. Many of you will be aware of the one of Maryport. That was the second one they did, but this one at Birdoswald showing these large amount of geophysical noise coming out here on this side of the fort, running out along the road, along the military road, and then again along the road here on the east side. Elements of geophysical traces down here on the cemetery and then down there in the valley. So a very extensive geophysical survey. And based on that, we invited Time Team to come in 1999, and Time Team did a few trenches. Notably, they did an evaluation of the cemetery, which was thought to be under threat of riverine erosion. They even dropped one of their people over the edge on an abseiling rope to scrape the section and see if there were any cremation urns sticking out of the section there. There weren't, although they did recover this one cremation group, 3rd century cremation group that I've put on the slide here, including these bone veneers that are typical of the 3rd century material from Broome. And they also did an evaluation within the eastern extramural area, and that evaluation took place around about there. 3 trenches, which at least showed the existence of stone buildings and showed that there was a substantial amount of Roman material culture among those buildings. In 2009, I'm just doing a run through here. In 2009, we did have an episode of riverine erosion. That bottom slide there shows the catastrophic collapse that took place, and we mitigated that by excavating a whole strip on that side of the cemetery, which sort of 15 meters back from the cliff edge, which mitigated any future erosion. It'll be a few years before anyone has to do it again. And in that cemetery excavation, we have a wide range of deposit types, simple pits, kists, a burial in a wooden box, different kinds of buster, different kinds of urn burial, and so on. The publication is ready to go, but waits a couple of scientific reports, which I'm still hanging around for. We should get publication next year because they are promised. And one of the most important of those scientific reports is the report, the isotope report on this lady. It's an urn cremation. Some of you will have seen this slide before, but includes objects linked to a small piece of ring mail. You can see there on the X-ray. And the only exact parallel that any of us have been able to find is a number of female cremations within pots containing the same thing, bits of chainmail, ring mail, with objects linked to it in the Przeworsk culture of central Poland. In fact, there are Polish colleagues who want this lady for their own. They're very excited by this. And of course, there's no reason why someone from that area shouldn't fetch up at Birdoswald being buried according to her usual home methods. So with that as being what we know about the extramural settlements at Birdoswald, a bit about the south, we've got the little building for Richmond, we've got the cemetery. We when I say we, I mean Ian Haynes and myself. I'm here sort of Ian's representative on earth, as it were. Jointly resourced project through Historic England and Newcastle University, facilitated by English Heritage, who of course are the site owners. 5 annual season duration, 2020 to 24. This was modified, of course, due to COVID, and we had a double season in 2021. We did the season this year. So essentially, we've done 3 seasons. We've got 2 more to do, and it is certainly initiated a training program for Newcastle University student guys, emphasising digital recording from our point of view. And the aims are to characterise the 3 areas of the extramural settlement that we don't know anything very much about apart from the geophysics, to the east, to the west, and importantly also to the north. To compare the phasing and character of the extramural settlements with what's known of the fort, the southern vicus, and the cemetery, and ambitious, this number 3, isn't it? To collect basic data to allow the creation of a first draft holistic narrative of the history of the Roman military settlement of Birdoswald in all its aspects, intramural, extramural, and funerary. I cribbed that straight from the project design, as you might imagine. I think I probably wrote it as well. Anyway, and also finally to establish whether on the berm at Birdoswald there are these obstacle pits of the kind found in Tyneside over the years. So this is our aim. Extramural settlement at the bottom there, extramural settlement project, years 1 to 3 as it turned out, 2021, the double season, 2022, and we're going back there next year. The berm we did in 2021, the extramural settlement in the north, we started this year, we'll be back there next year, and on the west, we'll be going in next year and the year after. So we've got our work cut out for us. And again, we are guided very much by this geophysical survey. What can it show us? Well, one of the things it showed us for certain was Haverfield's little building, and seeing it there now in context with all this Roman material on the geophysics, it makes it even more possible that that is actually a Roman building rather than anything else. A stone drain, which Haverfield recorded, is exactly here. Our trench locations, again, guided largely by the geophysical survey. So area C at the top is for the berm. Area B down here is to take a structure running from the main street, coming out of the principal east gate, to take a single structure and look at its history. Area A was targeted to examine an area around Richmond Square building. In other words, moving to some extent, as far as we could, from the known to the unknown. Unfortunately, in David and Alan's 2 publications in Britannia of the geophysical survey, they located Richmond's building in 2 different places. Our first idea was to put the trench here because it was thought that this was Richmond's building. In fact, it wasn't, and we had to be guided by our own geophysics done by Alex Turner of the university to try and we're also guided by Richmond's plan to actually identify exactly where his square building was. And I have to say, this published plan in the Cumberland Westmoreland transactions is extraordinarily accurate, and we ended up putting our trench area A right over that square building. So you'll see various drone shots of our work here. Area A down at the bottom, area B on the route out of the principal east gate, and area C for the berm running down there. We'll deal with the latter straight away. Area C, we are searching for obstacle pits of the kind we find on the berm in Tyneside, and as you can see, area C was entirely innocent of obstacle pits. Nice stretch of clay there with a post-medieval drain in it. We did find some drains at the base of Hadrian's Wall there. This shouldn't be surprising. This is of course the late Hadrianic stone replacement of the turf wall. So are we perhaps thinking that the use of obstacle pits either is a local thing, or perhaps they've dropped the idea of using them by the time they build the stone replacement. We need a lot more excavations on the berm to find that out. But anyway, at this point, this is a 20-meter stretch of the berm. They are not there. So area A, this is area A, and this structure here, this structure here is Richmond's allegedly square building. The first thing you can see that it's certainly not square, it's rectangular. Apart from that, yep, 3'6" wide walls, and indeed 13 courses deep from grass level. I mean, it's only 2 inches underneath the surface of the grass there. But we opened up another area, a further area to the north of it to examine related or ancillary structures. So I'm first going to talk about this northern area where we have this nice square structure here with this apsidal structure next to it and a very thick wall just there. We soon discovered that the thick wall, which you can see on the left, is the primary wall in this area. The apsidal structure here is butted against it, comes round here, is robbed out by a big ditch there, it comes around there. These two stones are the end of it, butting against that wall there. And within this area, these nice sandstone flagstones. I'll come to the big pit later. And sitting on those nice flagstones at one end of the area down here, 2 reused blocks, one of which is a bench support of the kind found elsewhere in bathhouses, Chester's bathhouse, and still in situ, of course, and the bathhouse at Bear's Den on the Antiron Wall. So this is the first, we perhaps start to think, well, are we in the vicinity of a bathhouse? There were other indications to suggest it. This nice square building with its huge flagstone floor, actually, are very nicely laid. You can see how in the top left there, the stones have been neatly mitered into that corner, into that little internal bench within the building, and then the stones neatly mitered into that corner. These are very big flagstones. It would take a bit of doing to cut them to that. That is quality work. It's not a mosaic, but hey, it's quality work. The slightly complicated slide, this one, but you see the wall of that square building here is bashed through the sandstone flags of the apsidal structure. So clearly postdates it. There's the bench end just there. So it's clearly bashed through it, and you can see here that you've got the edge of a construction trench cut through this black material. I'll come to black material later again, and filled with orange clay. The same is true here on the west wall of the building, and again, there's the clay-filled construction trench for that offset course. I know I've got a better slide of this than this, but this is the one I could find. And it's again cut through black material, and yet there's further black material being continued over the fill of that construction trench. So what we're looking at is deposition of black material, whatever that means, continuing after the construction of the square building, which cuts through the apsidal building. Okay, so far. And that section there, that section, this one here, continues through here. And we see the offset course, the construction cut, the fill of the construction cut, more black ash and burnt clay deposition accumulations over the top of that, sealed on this side by a gravel road or a gravel path, and that cut by this feature here, which contains, which is sort of lined by this shale deposit. Well, what is this cut? Well, the cut is for a water main. That's the section line there, the green line that we've just seen. And here is a trench running down here, another one running through here and cutting through our apsidal structure. And I've only shown a slide of 2 of these, or 3 actually. There's one there, one on line with it there. And these are iron rings which are placed upright in these narrow channels, and they are intended to link lengths of wooden water pipe together. So here we have a wooden, basically a water main. The fall is southwards, and it's bifurcating and cutting through that other building. So it's quite, it's quite an impressive thing, really. It's one of the only features that we could actually date, because the fill around the water pipes within this trench contained sort of 2nd quarter of the 3rd century material. So we've got a bit of a decent date there. Here are the iron water pipe collars, conservation images, and you can see that they basically have a central ridge. They're not just a ring, they have a central ridge, and the 2 water pipes would be shoved up against the central ridge. You put bang the first one in, then bang the water pipe up again, the wooden water pipe up against the other one, and it stops at the stop ridge. And we will be able to identify the species of timber from this mineralized wood, which is preserved in the corrosion products, in the rust. Now, those 2 buildings are these 2 buildings here. That's our nice square building. Our water pipe trench comes down here, and this is our apsidal building, and this is overlain over Biggins and Taylor's interpretive plan of the geophysics. And you can see that those structures, which look fairly impressive in their own right, are actually only a very small part of the edge of an extremely large building complex, which we don't understand. The Richmond building is this building down here, which shows fairly well on the geophysics there, but not so well here, and is completely absent in this area just here. And we'll see why that reason is shortly. So let's have a look at the Richmond building. First of all, one of the early features that we found was this sort of half-meter depth and very intense deposit of black charcoal and soot and ash. Horrible mucky stuff to dig, but it's got little pieces of roundwood and things like that that will be species ID'd in due course. It really is a really juicy and interesting deposit, if you like that kind of thing. You know people who do. And in terms of finds material from that deposit, we were finding, again, objects, ceramic building material objects which relate to hypocausts. So on the right here, is it on the right? Yes, on the is a piece of hypocaust box flue tile, and down in the bottom corner, these spacer bobbins. These things fit over iron spikes, which are driven into the stone wall, and the iron spike has a T on it, and this terracotta plaque, for instance, or something like that, is held away from the wall by means of these little bobbins, these spacer bobbins that exist in the middle. So this is a different way of jacketing a hypocaust wall from the more familiar box flue tile, but we've got both of these in this burnt deposit. And yes, Susan there, who's not here unfortunately, is standing in the building, and you can see, yeah, it surely is 13 courses deep, as Richmond said it was. But again, we're looking at that dip, that slack, that's the morass, the deep bit. And again, the minor east gate here, which we excavated in 1992, that top pier stone, the uppermost pier stone of 4 pier stones there, as you can see, 1.5 meters high, 1.5 meters deep, that is at grass level. So yet again, deep, deep archaeology, deep structural archaeology beneath the current ground level. The building at some point, it's got this entrance coming into it, stepped entrance. We were thinking perhaps semi-basement building, but at some point it was backfilled quite deliberately by a variety of material. These look like deliberate dumps. These are not silting. And we are thinking in terms that there is a deliberate leveling of this building, a deliberate backfilling of the building, and that is the reason why the demolition of the building is just down to this flat string course and no further. It looks like we're going to demolish down to the string course, finish it there, backfill it up to the level of string course. Jobs are good, and that's the building going out of use. What date that was, we don't know. It's just the sequence. But once you got rid of that, or most of that deliberate dumping, we ended up with a building like this. I think you'll agree that's pretty impressive, down below grass level. Yes, 13 courses all the way around the south wall, the north wall there, apart from the fact that this has been taken away by a huge quarry pit, which takes the wall away and also took all this material here, whatever it may have been, also took that away. So there's a huge quarry pit taking out this corner of the building, if it is a corner, and it might not be a corner. In front of us, we've got this little cross wall here. We'll have a look at that in a second. No, we won't. We'll look at it now, because that, on the penultimate Friday of this year's excavation, in front of that little cross wall was the hypercaust. So we got a fragment of a heated room there, and even a complete box flue tile in its collapsed position just there. So we have water and we have heat. So we have a heated building to which water may be conveyed. That's the nearest I'm going to get to saying bathhouse, mansio, whatever. And again, just up there in the position pointed by the arrow, another water pipe collar. This is a drone shot of where we ended this year's excavation. So if you superimpose, do a montage of the 2021 excavation, this northern area here, we permanently backfilled at the end of 2021, a montage of last year and this year's excavation with water pipelines superimposed, we can see that water pipe there, that collar there, is headed for the area where the heat is. And that's as far as I can go. We will obviously be coming back to this to dig this, to try and explore this building, particularly the interior, further next year. But just down there on the last day, we started to see what looks like an earlier water channel. And in that wall there, at a low level, we found there's an aperture, the bottom three courses, which has got soot coming through it. And we're thinking maybe Pryfernium be buried under here somewhere. So watch this space. If you invite me back in 2 years' time, I'll tell you what it was. But there is this suspicion that the water is coming to this spot where the heat is, and just wonder whether that huge quarry pit is not for removing something a little bit special, like perhaps a metal water boiler in that corner. That's just speculation, pure speculation, and it's probably wrong. You can see the slope here leading down to the Richmond building, as I'll carry on calling it. There was a concentrated effort of backfilling this slope up to that wall, leveling it out up to the north wall of the building there. First of all, by dumping a whole load of rubble there. Actually, look at this slide. You see this flat slab there. Use that for orientation. That's it there. First of all, filling up with rubble, and then on top of that rubble, and again, we don't have the dating yet. On top of that rubble, a couple of small rooms, a small building, which is leaned to against the north wall of the Richmond building. Again, there's those flat stones. But even when this is being leveled, even when these little buildings are being constructed, there's still an effort being made to ensure access to this doorway by building this retaining wall, which retains these small buildings and retains the rubble upon which they're built. All interpretations gratefully received from the crowd. We have a lot of things to think about in terms of the structure of this building. I mentioned the little possible Pryfernium. We also have, if we go back to that slide there, you can see this sort of funny slot in the wall here, funny sort of timber slot maybe, and on the opposite wall also another slot built into the wall and various sockets here which are not putlog holes. They go all the way through. They're very well constructed and they're far too far apart for scaffolding holes or for rafters of any kind anyway. And this top step, secondary, look at this underside of that top step. It's clearly secondary, it's clearly reused, possibly a windowsill or a top of a square window or something like that, but it's not originally designed to be there, despite the fact it's very worn on that top surface. Right, so that is our area A. Let's move on to our area B. One of the things to note here is the relationship with the principal east gate. The principal east gate, the north portal is blocked. And if you look with the eye of faith in the geophysics, you can see a very much narrow road coming up to the south portal. That becomes relevant. As area B, this is this year, when we found this, we were able to excavate partly last year, partly this year, extended this year, at least one whole strip building facing onto the road and another smaller structure here. And the walling of this building shows various alterations, various changes, various rebuilds. We certainly have here, I don't think you can't quite see that slant there, and that is not flat, but this is subsidence over the turf wall ditch, because this building is built across the line of the block north portal of the east gate. It respects the single carriageway coming out of the south portal, and the roadside drain, the coverstones here of the roadside drain, align exactly with the spina of the gate. So this is the road surface here coming out of the unblocked south portal of the gate. As to the subsidence over the turf wall ditch, well, there you go. That's the same flagstones there, showing this angled subsidence here. And if you look at, if you look here, you can see that that wall is sort of falling over to the east rather. There you go. So you've got the subsiding stones there, this slanting over to the east. This is all in association with the turf wall ditch underneath. And you can also see the stone wall, the replacement stone wall running along the roadside behind. So that's a relationship between this building and the stone wall. But that back corner there, the back corner of these two buildings side by side, here and here, the back walls are on line, is just under 1 meter in height. That gives us a few interesting relationships with the earthworks. The earthworks at Birdoswald are very well marked. You can see them very clearly on here, particularly the Principia just here. The area where the infill of the dip is has been ploughed in the medieval period, just here. The only area where the soil was deep enough, one presumes. But these earthworks around here, we have tended to assume were the material that was taken out when the wall and the gate were exposed in the 1850s. They aren't. Our work clearly proved that. So there's the stone wall, the north corners of the fort, etc. Stone wall, Principia, and this is the location of area B, and we've shown that this bank here is actually the agger of the narrowed road coming out of the south portal here, and it's sitting right on top of the turf wall line. So that road on the turf wall, and then the subsidence from the turf wall ditch to the north of it. And this ridge here is the rear walls, the line of rear walls of buildings fronting onto that road and forming a terrace, effectively forming a terrace overlooking this area here, where geophysics shows us, again, there are many stone buildings. Why was the turf wall replaced on a different line in stone? I'm beginning to think, and I'm quite happy if people don't agree with me, but I'm beginning to think the reason is it's basically a land grab. There's not enough room for an adequate extramural area around the fort, so we move the linear barrier to enclose more space. It's a simple explanation, but I'm happy to be told it's nonsense. You see what I mean here? There's our building here, all this stuff here going on before you get to the stone wall. Area D, north of the wall. Well, why are we here for a start? Well, we're here because the geophysical survey suggested that there is Roman material, Roman activity to the north of the linear barrier, to the north of Hadrian's Wall. And we started here looking for, this is where we became a bit of a cropper actually, looking for what looked like, what Biggins and Teller interpreted it as stone buildings. So we opened up some areas with machine and there was nothing there. Well, I say nothing, there were a couple of ditches, but what we were seeing was not what the interpretation of the geophysics said. And we had cut this trench here. This was a bit of a, this was not great. I mean, you can see, we could see some surfaces here perhaps, but you can see also here's this biodisc treatment plant, and this is the line of the water coming from the biodisc treatment plant, which is supposed to be sterile. When we got to this end, we showed that it wasn't sterile and backfilled pretty quickly. And they're going to have to do something about the biodisc treatment plant. But we'd done this work here. We'd taken this L shape here. We'd found a couple of unpromising ditches, and we said, well, we've got an hour's machining time. What should we do with it? So we thought, well, let's go that way for about 5 meters and see what comes up. The 5 meters turned into 25 and an extension on the north side. And the reason for that was we were beginning to find archaeology, and lots of it. Not only our little ditched enclosures from our original L shape, but this curvilinear enclosure here. And here you can see the rectilinear end of a clay sill building clay sill. We would have timber sill beams on top of that, and it has a little ditch, an eaves drip or something like that going around it. We will be exploring this more next year. Again, this is different from the settlement south of the fort. It's different from the settlement to the east of the fort. And here we've got smithing hearths and industrial waste, use of coal as smithing fuel, and as much cultural material here as from area A and B combined last year. 2nd century to mid-2nd to mid-3rd century pottery by and large, as far as we could tell without having the specialist analysis. Certainly at least that. I didn't see anything that I could recognize, I personally could recognize it later. But our two intagli from the whole project, from the 2 years or effectively 3 years of project, came from north of the wall. Large, everywhere you can think of in the 2nd and 3rd century, every form you can think of in the 2nd and 3rd century. There's definitely industrial activity. There is definitely domestic activity, and a sort of scattering of finds. I'll put this one on for someone in the audience. She knows who she is. I mean, this is the iron nails of a shoe. It ain't quite Vindolanda, but we love it. And the pot base there, and so on and so forth. So this is just typical of the sort of scatter of material that we got in the surfaces, the sort of waste dump services associated with these buildings. Speaking of fines, unfortunately, of course, our fines material from this year and from north of the wall has not been conserved, and I don't have any images of it, but this is from last year, last year's area A and area B, some militaria, shape, spearhead, projectile point, and some other nice bits and pieces. We could parallel this type of stuff pretty much this year as well. The lead seal, which we've not had read yet, we've got another 2 of those, brooches, the seal box, hairpins, so on and so forth. The usual domestic mixture, but it's actually quite good. And portable altars. I put portable in inverted commas. Some of these are the weight of 3 half bricks, and I wouldn't like to carry them around with me. But the little one on the side, the one on the right, that certainly is portable. You could stick that in your coat pocket should you wish to do so. And this one, the larger one, they're in situ between the 2 stone buildings in the 2 strip buildings in area B. So, what have we got? We've got clear differences between the settlement areas on the east side, on the north side, and on the south side, both in terms of the type of structures and the types of activities that seem to be going on. Next year and the year after, although we're going to continue to the east and continue to the north, we're heading west, young man. And what do we think we might see there? We're already getting the idea that there is zoning in the different areas of this settlement. And we already have a hint of that on the west side. We can contrast very clearly the geophysics here with our narrow road and our intensive stone buildings here. Also stone buildings here. We proved that through the little time team piece of work. But this road comes out and widens out into something that almost looks like a medieval marketplace. It's very different from what we see on the east side. Have we got a different kind of zoning here? What we intend to do, start next year, is one long trench which will encapsulate buildings on either side of this open area and go across the open area itself, remembering that the point of the excavation is not to excavate big buildings, things like that, although we seem to be doing that in area A, but to characterize these areas of extramural settlement, to sort of set an agenda for future research. That's the limit of what we can do, and that's what we are doing. Thank you very much.